A billionaire gave a poor girl his credit card. What she bought revealed an incredible truth that. Emily stood behind the counter at the diner, her hands trembling slightly as she wiped down the metal surface. The rich aroma of coffee mingled with the smell of greasy burgers, a scent so familiar yet stifling. This evening, however, was special. They were hosting a charity gala for the local school. A mix of hope and dread gnawed at her insides. This event marked another opportunity to showcase her art portfolio. She had worked on tirelessly, yet she still felt the crushing weight of financial barriers. Just as the doors swung open to unveil guests clad in suits and gowns, her heart raced. Among them stood David Harrington, the billionaire. He was a figure of fascination in their town, a man whose wealth loomed larger than the rolling hills beyond. She watched as he mingled effortlessly, charm radiating off him like the warmth of the setting sun. Emily, he caught her off guard, voice alive with curiosity. You have an incredible spirit. A rueful smile creased her lips. Just trying to make a living. Ever thought of pursuing art school? His question set off a whirlwind in her chest, infusing her aspirations with weight and urgency. Before she could contemplate a response, he handed her his credit card, eyes piercing but somehow encouraging. Invest in your future. Doubt ricocheted in her mind. Use his money. This was a moral quagmire. Her thoughts spiraled into a web of apprehension. Was this the ticket to the life she yearned for, or a chain that would bind her further to the disparities of wealth? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Adrenaline pumped through her veins as she stood paralyzed, his card heavy in her palm. Thoughts swirled, each one competing for attention. She could purchase textbooks, supplies for her art, a lifeline that could help her break free. But the voices of her family echoed in her mind. How could she reconcile her dreams with her loyalty to them? They struggled so fiercely, yet here she was, handed a symbol of wealth. Emily. David prompted, his patience unwavering. Finally, she exhaled and nodded. Okay. I'll make it worthwhile. The relief mingling with her trepidation felt like a stir in a storm. As the weight of expectation pressed down, fear gripped her. What did this mean? Would her family feel abandoned, resentful of a future she could have if they remained trapped in their current struggles? Each creak of the diner's floorboards echoed her rising anxiety. Emily took a step forward into the uncertainty, chasing a flicker of light while casting shadows on her loved one's frowns, but the community's glances shifted. Admirations turned to whispers, admiration turned to envy. Who did she think she was now? The reflection in her mirror became foreign, as the world that had once felt safe now wrapped around her in constriction. Then came an unexpected treasure intertwined with a web of familial ties, something she had not anticipated. In unearthing her family's past, a startling connection to David Harrington emerged, a truth that cracked the rigid line she'd drawn between ambition and loyalty. As secrets unraveled, Emily stood at the precipice. What did success mean now? Would stitching the quilt of her family's struggles into her future solidify bonds or sever them irrevocably? The choice lay heavy on her heart, tinged with both resolution and dread. In that moment, the path before her twisted and turned, leaving her with an unshakable question: who was she becoming, and how would it shape not just her future, but the very fabric of her family, now entwined with the threads of a billionaire's influence? The answers lingered just out of reach as she grasped for clarity amidst uncertainty. Emily paced the cramped apartment she shared with her family, her fingers tracing the edges of the art supplies she had purchased with David's credit card. The colors were vibrant, the canvases stretched and ready for her ideas to burst forth, yet each item felt less like a tool for her creativity and more like a stovepipe of pressures, both old and new. The walls echoed with laughter and chatter from her siblings, their innocence a stark contrast to the complex emotions swirling within her. They were excited but oblivious to the gravity of her dilemma. As Emily listened to their joyous narratives, the taste of guilt settled on her tongue. She knew that every brushstroke she envisioned might come at the cost of their peace. The thought alone wrapped around her heart like a vice. "Emily, can you help me with my project?" Her younger brother's voice cut through her introspection, pulling her reluctantly back to reality. Sure," she replied, forcing a smile, but her mind was elsewhere. After a brief session helping him, Emily excused herself under the pretense of needing fresh air. She stepped outside, the cool evening breeze offering a fleeting sense of clarity. The streets felt like a labyrinth of dreams and fears, each corner echoing with decisions yet to be made. Her artist's heart yearned for freedom, yet the roots of loyalty tangled her spirit. David's words lingered in her mind, an echo urging her toward a future swathed in possibilities. "Invest in your future," he had said, and the phrase danced around her thoughts like an elusive butterfly. What would that future look like? Would it concede the dreams of those she loved, or could it propel them all into a shared horizon of hope? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting shadows that engulfed her surroundings, Emily's resolve crystallized into a plan. She lacked the clarity she sought but had to anchor her intentions. Maybe the solution wasn't just about her, it involved weaving her family's stories into her art, creating a narrative that paid homage to both her aspirations and their sacrifices. That night, sleep eluded her as thoughts spiraled wildly. The brush in her hand felt different, a tool of liberation transformed into a weapon of self-discovery. Should she paint her family's struggles? Should her work reflect the emotional turmoil of grappling with privilege as much as it celebrated ambition? Here lay the intersection of her identity, an artist blessed and burdened, loved and loving, ambitious yet accountable. Days turned into a blur as Emily took the plunge. She poured herself into her art, confronting themes of economic disparity and familial loyalty, channeling her inner conflict onto canvas as colors battled it out in swirls and strokes. The art school she once feared to approach now felt like a gateway to transformation, not only for her but for those she held dear. Each finished piece became a conversation starter, drawing eyes and evoking feelings that resonated with people far and wide, yet, every success raised questions. Was she distorting her family's narrative? Would they feel betrayed by her interpretations, or proud of her ability to frame their trials in a new light? Fresh queries collided with her burgeoning ambition, testing her resolve and principles. As she prepared for her first showcase, a mixture of excitement and anxiety welled up inside her. Would David attend? What would she say if he did? Emily resolved to find a balance, to bring her family's struggles visibly into her art yet remain faithful to her own journey, a tapestry woven from both sides of the divide. On the night of her showcase, she stood in front of the first piece, bold, striking the face of a young girl draped in the fabric of her past struggles. A deep breath filled her lungs as applause erupted, but her heart thrummed with uncertainty. Amidst the cheers, she caught sight of David in the back of the room, watching intently. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, yet it felt electric, igniting a flurry of thoughts within her. Could she articulate her journey, the complexities of her experience, that unraveling connection between them in a few spoken words? Would he see that her success was not merely hers but a bridge that connected their intertwined fates? As her moment to speak drew near, Emily stood at the crossroads of her past and future. The echo of David's encouragement resonated within her. The time had come to face not just her audience but the truth of who she was becoming, and a simmering question loomed large: could she harness their astonishment to catapult herself onward, without losing the very essence of where she came from? The spotlight felt blinding yet strangely comforting as Emily steeled herself to address the audience that had come to witness her transformation. Heart racing, she clutched the microphone, feeling its cold metal against her palm. Each gaze, filled with anticipation, bore down on her with weighty expectation. In that moment, the culmination of her journey surged within her, as thrilling as it was terrifying. "Thank you for being here tonight," she began, her voice wavering. "My art is a reflection of my life, of the tension between personal ambition and familial loyalty." She paused, her mind racing. Should she share the raw truths of her upbringing? Would they understand the complexity of her emotions? "I want to tell you a story," The words poured forth, forming a narrative that traversed her identity and her family. She spoke of her siblings, their laughter, and the pressures they navigated together. With each stroke of her words, she painted a vivid picture of both joy and strife, exposing the duality that lived within her. My art isn't just for me, it's a voice for those whose struggles often remain unheard. Emily felt the room shift. The heaviness that had encased her heart dissipated slightly as she expressed the rawness of her experiences. Small moments of childhood, a rickety old table where they shared meals under the soft glow of a lamp, emerged in her recollection, moments that had shaped who she was today. She revealed how art became her sanctuary, a place to process grief and celebrate resilience. Yet as she wove her tale, uncertainty began to creep back in. Would her family support her exposure of their shared struggles? She could sense their presence, her siblings peering with pride mixed with concern. Would they feel objectified, stripped of their dignity as she crafted their story for an audience? All of a sudden, doubts clawed at her resolve. Drawing her thoughts back, she coaxed herself into a confident vulnerability. Art is not merely an expression, it challenges, it provokes. It's uncomfortable. I wouldn't be honest if I didn't show our scars along with our dreams. With this declaration, a new urgency ignited within her. She was no longer just sharing her truth, she was claiming it. This was about empowerment, a way to honor the past while shaping a future that felt uncertain yet exhilarating. As the applause rang through the space, resonating with acceptance and recognition, one clarity dawned on her: she had become brave enough to relinquish the fear of judgment, choosing instead to embrace the power of narration. Emily quickly scanned the crowd for David, and when their eyes met again, she felt a swell of connection, a realization that their paths, however complicated, were interwoven in ways they had yet to fully understand. But even amidst the applause, a shadow loomed: a genuine encounter with her family's unarticulated feelings. Would they share in her success or resent the vulnerability she had laid bare? The thought clutched at her throat, coiling tension back into her heart. She needed to reach out, to decode their silence, to gauge their reactions. As the crowd thinned, she sought her siblings, needing to bridge the gap between what they felt and what she had just revealed. Emily's heart raced as she approached them. The connection they shared now felt fragile, a thread barely holding together the intricate web of familial bonds that had defined her life until now. The moment hovered in anticipation, poised to either fracture her newfound freedom or deepen their ties. What would they say? How would they react to their stories being shared so openly? Departing from the spotlight, she treaded into a dialogue pregnant with uncertainty, where the truth met raw emotion, and defined her journey ahead. Emily searched the room for familiar faces, blocking out the noise of lingering applause as it melded into a buzz. It hurt to think about how there had once been a veil drawn over her family's stories, almost as if they were trying to guard against an unspoken shame. Now, she was forcing their lives into the light, and uncertainty gnawed at her. The familiar laughter of her younger brother floated through the space, entwined with a more subdued tone. He stood with their sister. Emily could see her restraint clear even from a distance. Emily approached, her heart drumming painfully against her ribs. "Hey guys," she said, looking between their expressions, trying to measure the response she could read. Her sister's brow furrowed, arms crossed, while her brother maintained a cautious smile. "That was powerful," her brother asserted, the light in his eyes not quite reflecting the spirit of his words. "Was it?" Emily probed, finding the courage to draw the words from him like pulling thorns from a rose. "Did it resonate, or was it too much?" Her sister unfolded her arms, her posture shifting. "I think you did a great job. But there were memories there that maybe we didn't want shared." The way her sister's voice softened at the end was almost a plea for understanding, revealing a deeper rift that had yet to be bridged. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," Emily quickly replied, the heat of fear mingling with the disbelief. "I thought it was important to show our truths, to tell our story. But at what cost?" Her sister's tone sharpened with a sudden edge, revealing her discontent. "What if they take it the wrong way? What if they think I'm just a character in your story?" "It's my story, too," Emily shot back, her frustration bubbling up. In this moment, she realized the demand for balance, an act of navigation between her own voice and the truths of those she loved. "I've carried our secrets for so long." The weight was unbearable. A silence fell, thick and hesitant. She felt the distance between them stretching wider, air dense with unspoken thoughts. Emily's mind whirled with the challenge of perception versus intent. Was she being selfish for wanting her narrative acknowledged? "I just needed you to know," she continued, softer now. "I wanted to honor what we've been through, not diminish it. I thought sharing could help us heal." "In theory, maybe," her brother chimed in, but she saw concern molding his features. "In practice, it feels like you've put us on display without our permission. It feels raw." The walls that had shielded her family's emotions felt far from secure now, vulnerable to changes each of them were grappling with. Here, in this moment of connection, she recognized the path of self-assertion she had stepped onto but realized that it did not come without strain. Emily took a breath, aware of the weight her presentation had placed on all of them. "I understand if you're upset. I'm still trying to figure out how to use my voice. It's new territory for me." The truth was, this wasn't just about her journey, it was about their family facing the holds of the past they could not ignore. Together, the engagement with their emotional complexity was unnerving, but in acknowledging it, Emily found her footing. They were in this together, and despite the rocky foundation, she sensed that exploring this fresh vulnerability could fortify rather than fracture their bonds. "A chance to heal together, then," her brother suggested, a softened tone washing over his initial caution. "That's what we should focus on." "Yes, together," Emily breathed out. Hope flickered, igniting the possibility of growth amidst the uncertainty that a newfound determination surged within her. She could prioritize open dialogues, navigate the confusion in a way that encompassed their bonded past and uncertain future. However, even as that light illuminated the conversation, there was a daunting challenge waiting on the horizon. Would her artistic expression invite a deeper reconciliation, or would it unearth old wounds so profound they would rival the healing she sought to achieve? As she looked into their eyes, a question lurked in the back of her mind, one that would push her even further on this path of self-discovery. How far would she go to fight for her voice and her family's acceptance of it? Emily left the gathering with the weight of her family's mixed emotions pressing down on her chest. The exhilarating rush of sharing her story was quickly overshadowed by doubt. How had she convinced herself that exposing her family's history was synonymous with healing? She felt no relief, only the gnawing anxiety of unburdened secrets laid bare. Driving home, she couldn't shake her brother's words raw, on display echoing in her mind. Each traffic light seemed to perpetuate her unease, their red glow mirroring her internal turmoil. Was it truly too much? Had she crossed a line she could never uncross? For the first time in her artistic career, she felt the bitter taste of regret mingling with a flicker of defiance. When she reached her small apartment, the familiar coziness that usually greeted her felt alien. She sat on the edge of her couch, her laptop closed, the blank screen reflecting her current state of mind. She had wanted to share their truths, but perhaps she had exposed too much, leaving her family vulnerable, exposed to judgment. Was there a way to reclaim her narrative without alienating those she loved? To distract herself, she opened a drawer and pulled out a file labeled Ideas. Flipping through her sketches, concepts, and half-written pieces, she discovered the forgotten enthusiasm that sparked her creative energy. Each idea represented a facet of her life but also resonated with the undercurrents of her family narrative. A thought struck her: what if she took a step back? What if she experimented with the juxtaposition of raw honesty and artistic abstraction? She envisioned infusing her art with symbolism to tell their story without putting them in a spotlight they hadn't chosen. It could allow her to share the same weight of her journey while also conveying that their stories were merely threads of a more extensive tapestry. The idea grew, feeding the embers of resolve within her. She picked up a brush and began to paint, her canvas transforming into a tempest of colors that fused and coalesced, as if giving physical form to her conflicting emotions. It was a raw catharsis, a commitment to navigate through the labyrinth of her family's histories without further friction. The act alone was liberating. She would work towards distilling the essence of who they were without removing the protective layers they built over the years. Days turned into weeks as she immersed herself in creation, testing boundaries with every stroke. Each completed piece provided insight into both herself and the familial bonds at risk of fraying. She realized she had uncovered not just a way to tell their story, but to find a common ground, a bridge between expression and respect. But with every revelation came new questions. What if her family didn't recognize their truths as she portrayed them? What if her artistic interpretation sparked more conflict? The last stroke on her canvas revealed an image, symbols infused with colors intertwining, a complex representation of resilience and unity. But it still felt incomplete. The lingering question of her family's acceptance lingered, hanging in the air like an unfinished note. As she stood back to assess her work, her phone buzzed, jolting her from her trance. A message from her brother blinked on the screen. "Can we talk? I think we need to discuss what happened." The blood thrummed in her ears as she stared at the screen. Her heart raced. Would this be a moment to bridge the divide, or would it ignite a confrontation she wasn't prepared for? The path ahead seemed both daunting and necessary, and her stomach twisted with anticipation. It was time to confront not just her family's feelings about the story, but also the deeper truths of her own journey. How far could she push to find reconciliation, not only for herself, but for them all? Emily sat in her tiny living room, the disarray of paint tubes and brushes strewn around her testifying to her recent creative frenzy. The message from her brother burned a hole in her pocket, her phone pressed against her thigh as if it were the ticking clock of an impending confrontation. What did he want to discuss? Was it the gathering, their family history laid bare before strangers? Or perhaps her art, the pieces that intertwined their narratives without their consent? She pushed herself up, the uncertainty of her choices swirling around like the colorful chaos on her canvas. Her decision to blend abstraction and honesty had stemmed from an impulse, a desire to navigate the thin line between personal expression and familial loyalty. Her heart ached with the weight of her revelation. Her art was inherently tied to their histories, and now the risk of misunderstanding loomed larger than the canvas itself. Looking out of the window, the sunset painted the sky with hues of pink and gold, a stark contrast to the shadows of doubt lurking within her. She inhaled deeply, grounding herself. This was a moment for clarity, a chance to engage authentically. Her family deserved that much, even if her presentation of their story felt fractured. She needed to navigate this conversation with intention. Emily reached for her sketch pad, torn between the instinct to shield her family and the need to express her truth. She began to scribble notes to form her thoughts, intending to create a roadmap for their discussion. It wasn't enough just to ask for their understanding. She had to articulate her intentions clearly. What they feared, she realized, was not her art but the implications of exposure, the vulnerability that came hand in hand with honesty. The communities formed in her family were built on unspoken rules, layers of silence that protected them from judgment. In her attempt to unravel that silence, she may have threatened the very foundation they had built. Moments passed as she filled the pages, the ink flowing like the thoughts in her mind. As she wrote, clarity began to seep in. This was more than a conversation, it was a crucial moment for healing all of them. For years, they had navigated life in a carefully curated shell, but her exploration of their stories was an invitation to exist more authentically. With newfound determination, Emily decided to approach this dialogue as a partnership rather than a confrontation. What if she framed her artistic journey as a path toward shared understanding? The thought was liberating. It wasn't merely about exposing their vulnerabilities but rather opening doors to discover deeper connections. Emily glanced at the clock and realized time was fleeting. She sent a quick reply to her brother, "I'm free now. Let us talk." The act of sending that message felt monumental. It signified not just the mounting tension of their relationship but the possibility of reconciliation. Her heart raced as her thoughts spiraled. Was she ready to face the music? The vision of her art flooded back into her mind, a resonant tapestry of emotions begging for attention. She imagined each member of her family standing before the canvas, viewing their lives from an eclectic perspective. This was the essence of her creative endeavor, a way to coalesce individual narratives into a shared experience. As she prepared to meet her brother, a sense of resolve fortified her spirit. No matter the outcome, they would emerge from this conversation transformed. There was no turning back now. She had made her choice, and she was ready to embrace whatever came next. As the door opened a crack, anticipation gripped her. Would her brother see the beauty in her flaws, or would this only deepen the fissures within their family? Before she could process another thought, he stepped in with a determined expression and a frown that hinted at uncharted territory. Emily steeled herself for his words, ready to step into the unknown and confront the truths that had lain dormant for far too long. The time had come to face not only the impact of her art but the very fibers of their familial ties, woven through pain and love alike. Emily braced herself against the impending storm of confrontation as her brother stepped over the threshold. The air thickened with unspoken tension, hanging between them like a taut string ready to snap. She searched his face for clues, trying to decipher whether he was coming as an ally or an adversary. "Emily," he began, his voice steady but lined with an urgency that made her stomach tighten. "We need to talk about your art. About what it means for the family." She watched him carefully. His concern was palpable, a tangled mix of protectiveness and frustration that broke the surface of their usual sibling banter. Emily was reminded of all the times growing up when he had remained steadfast in his role, a guardian in a family that often veered into chaotic waters. But today, the stakes felt different. This was not just an art critique, it was a confrontation with the truths that had long been submerged beneath layers of family loyalty. "Let us sit," she suggested, gesturing to the nearest chair. She opted for the one across from him, wanting to maintain eye contact. This wasn't just about her anymore. This delicate dance required both of them to take a step forward together. "Why now, Em?" His question cut through her thoughts, sharp and point-blank. "You could have kept this to yourself. Why make it public?" Taking a steadying breath, she realized that her choice to showcase their family stories was not merely an artistic venture, but an essential act of catharsis, not just for her, but for them all. "Because I believe we need to talk about this," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I've carried our stories for too long. They deserve a voice." He frowned, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, defensive. Emily's heart sank momentarily. Would he never understand the necessity of vulnerability? Yet, somewhere beneath the surface, she sensed a flicker of curiosity, perhaps even hope. "Do you think exposing our past will help us?" he questioned, the skepticism heavy in the air. "I think hiding it has already hurt us." She leaned forward, the distance between them an intangible barrier that mirrored their emotional disconnect. "Art is about transformation, about unveiling. It can heal us, not tear us apart. I want to bring our stories into the light, not just for others, but for us. It's an invitation, a point of connection." The silence that followed felt monumental, heavy with unresolved feelings. She wondered if he could see how intertwined their paths were, how their shared childhood experiences formed the foundation of her work. Each painting was, in effect, a tribute to the moments they had lived, both painful and joyous. "Emily, you might misunderstand. This isn't just your narrative," he finally said, softer now. "It's all of us. You think you're elevating us, but there's a risk of tearing us down in the process." She glanced around the room, the clutter of her creative space now feeling suffocating. It wasn't just her brother sitting before her, it was her entire family, waiting to find their footing in an unpredictable landscape. The realization hit her. Her art might serve as both a mirror and a window. A mirror reflecting their struggles and fears while simultaneously offering a window into possibilities of connection and healing. She had to show him that her intention was not merely to expose but to illuminate. "Can we view this together?" Emily proposed, her voice trembling. "Can we use this as a way to find each other again? To not just exist within our roles but to feel our way back to who we are?" His stance softened. There was a flicker of understanding in his eyes, and for the first time, she dared to envision a shared path forward. But just as that thought took root, the specter of uncertainty approached again. How would their family react to being exposed? Would they embrace vulnerability or recoil in fear? As questions spun in her mind, Emily recognized a critical truth: this conversation went beyond her art, it was about the essence of family. The weight shifted, leaving her both anxious and invigorated. She was no longer just a creator but a conduit for their collective healing. One step at a time, she thought. Each conversation, each brushstroke could forge a new narrative. Let us go through these stories together, she finally said, her heart pounding with a mix of trepidation and hope. We can create something beautiful if you're willing to join me. His nod was tentative but promising. But just as a sense of calm began to settle between them, the phone buzzed again, bringing an ominous notification from a family member she hadn't expected. A confrontation loomed, and its implications would not only test their resolve but could threaten the very fabric of their familial ties. What did it say? What had she inadvertently unleashed? Emily's heart raced as she reached for the phone, torn between apprehension and a flicker of curiosity. The screen illuminated her brother's worried face and echoed the tension that had been building between them. She opened the notification, her instinct stealing for whatever awaited her. The message was from her aunt. It simply read, "We need to talk about the exhibit. It's not just your art. You're crossing a line." The implications were clear and ominous, the subtle suggestion of a family gathering meant to confront her choices clawed at Emily. She felt an urge to push back, to defend herself against the decline into judgment that threatened to engulf her. "Is it about the show?" Her voice was quieter than she'd intended, wavering slightly. She hadn't anticipated such swift repercussions, and now it felt as though a weight had been dropped in the room, a heaviness that smothered the fragile connection she had begun to forge with her brother. "Emily," he said, drawing his brows together, "this could get ugly. Family doesn't always react well to personal revelations." His warning was sharp, the statement a clear reminder of the realities they both faced. "But this is our story," she blurted, grappled her emotions. The fire of her passion surfaced, so easily ignited. "They can't silence me." "Are you sure about that?" he countered, an undercurrent of concern running beneath his words. "There are ways to share it without burning bridges." Emily felt the sting of his words. The idea of crossing familial boundaries pressed against her like an invisible barrier, making her reconsider her approach. She did not want to isolate herself further, but the thought of stifling her voice felt equally suffocating. This was her moment to break free from the chains of unspoken family history, to carve her identity through the very art that encapsulated their existence. Her breath came shallow as she weighed the risk of rejection against the potential for understanding. What if she just stayed quiet? Would that protect them, or would it perpetuate the cycle of fear? She thought about her childhood, about closeted conversations in darkened corners where secrets burrowed deeper instead of being exposed to the light. She sensed an urgent need to confront that legacy. "Maybe," she finally said, her voice steadier and more measured. "Maybe there's a way I can reach out that allows everyone to be part of this, even in a small way." She could hear the oscillation of hope creeping back into her tone, acknowledging that it didn't have to be an all-or-nothing scenario. "Compromise?" he replied, tilting his head slightly, measuring her sincerity. "That could work. But you need to prepare yourself. You'll face resistance even if you meet them halfway. Resistance is part of the journey." As she spoke the words, a newfound determination sparked within her. The thought of weaving her family's narrative into her art felt more monumental now. It wasn't merely her voice, it was theirs, too. Deeply considering her next move, she felt the anticipation, the sense of untapped power within her artistic journey. What if she invited her family to contribute? What if she included them in the process, giving them agency in their own stories? Perhaps by acknowledging their fears, their reactions, she could foster a sense of collective healing without denying her own vision. "Let us meet with them together," she suggested, meeting her brother's curious gaze. "I'm willing to hear their concerns, but I won't let them dilute my journey." As he nodded in reluctant agreement, she felt a rush of exhilaration combined with the cold grip of anxiety. This could either be a turning point in her life or the moment things fell apart. "I'll prepare for the meeting," she continued, jotting down her thoughts that swirled in her mind like a turbulent cyclone. "I want to make sure they see value in what I'm trying to do." Her brother sighed, that same defensive armor creeping back up. "Just remember, it won't be easy. They might not be who you think they are in this moment." Emily's resolve faltered, uncertainty creeping in. What if they rejected her? What if they condemned her? As the realities of her situation threatened to simmer just beneath the surface again, she realized action was better than speculation. She needed to make the leap, to be visible and brave in her pursuit of self-expression, but as she mentally prepared herself for this upcoming confrontation, another notification pinged her phone, shattering the fragile calm. What additional storm was brewing on the horizon, one that might complicate her endeavor further? What new challenges awaited her? Too many questions lingered like shadows. She had to confront them before they threatened to swallow her whole. Emily stared at her phone, the screen flashing with the familiar flash of yet another text. It was from her uncle, a succinct message that echoed her aunt's earlier concerns. "We can't let this tear us apart before we've had a chance to discuss it." The tightness in her chest intensified. It felt as though her entire family was poised on the edge of battle, armed with unarticulated judgments and the sharpness of familial loyalty. Each word on the screen felt like an accusation, a call for her to retract her artistic ambition which had become so entwined with her sense of identity. She threw the phone down, frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. Why was she being asked to hold back? Art was meant to challenge perceptions, to delve into uncomfortable truths. The very essence of her work was about unveiling her family's buried narratives. She couldn't betray that vision, especially not for the sake of their comfort. To navigate this chasm between her voice and their fears, she needed a strategy. As she pulled out her sketchbook, the blank pages beckoned her like an unfathomable void. This was her space, a sanctuary for ideas to take shape and evolve into the palpable medium she thrived on. She scribbled furiously, the brush and ink swirling across the page like chaotic thoughts moving toward clarity. The realization struck her. She needed to construct a visual presentation that captured the depth of her family's legacy, revealing the complexity of their experiences while allowing her to retain her voice. She would create a series of pieces that represented both their stories as well as her own emotions. These works would serve as conversation starters, not just as a means to express herself but as a bridge to connect with them. Yet, the vision was daunting. What if the artwork evoked feelings they weren't ready to confront? Could she handle their raw reactions, the backlash that might come from bringing their vulnerabilities to light? Her heart thudded with uncertainty, reminding her of the tightrope she was about to walk. With purpose, she organized her sketches. One by one, they started to come alive. Family portraits interspersed with scenes from childhood memories, layered with abstract expressions of emotions long buried. Each piece captured facets of their history she had previously been too fear-driven to explore. She felt the power of her art returning, filling the gap left by self-doubt. As dusk settled outside her window, a flicker of hope ignited alongside the apprehension. If she approached the meeting equipped with dynamic visuals of her intentions and emotions, she might be able to shift their perceptions. Art spoke a different language, one that melded emotion with understanding, and perhaps that language could lead them to a place of dialogue rather than confrontation. But then, just as her courage began to swell, another sound broke through the silence: a knock at the door. Her heart skipped. Who could it be? The thought that her family might come uninvited, to voice their concerns preemptively, sent a spark of anxiety racing through her. With a deep breath, she approached the door, torn between the anticipation of confrontation and the yearning for acceptance. What awaited her on the other side? Would this evening herald an openness or a fracture of beliefs? She turned the handle slowly, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. As the door creaked open, she felt the weight of her decisions hanging heavy, tethering her to the moment. She had to face what came next, no matter the consequences. What near truth awaited her outside? And would her family's reaction fortify her resolve or shatter her world anew? Emily stood still as she opened the door, the world outside laying a canvas of uncertainty and potential before her. In the doorway stood her sister, eyes wide but resolute. "Can we talk?" she asked softly, a hint of trepidation in her voice. "Of course," Emily replied, stepping aside to let her in, aware that this conversation might ultimately define their familial ties and the tumult within her heart. They settled onto the couch, Emily's sketchpad still strewn about chaotically, emblematic of the emotional tempest swirling inside her. There was a moment of silence, each processing the other's presence amidst the weighty tension that filled the air. "I know things have been strained," her sister said, glancing at the sketchbook. "What you shared at the exhibit, it stirred some deep feelings for all of us." Emily nodded, anticipation mingling with anxiety. "I didn't mean to put anyone on the spot. I thought it could help us heal." "Help how?" Her sister's brows furrowed slightly, concern etched in her features. "By putting our struggles on display for everyone. It feels like you're giving away pieces of us without asking if we're ready." The weight of her words struck Emily, guilt and frustration crashing over her like a wave. "I just wanted my art to reflect the truth of our family, our struggles, our resilience. It's who we are. It's all I've ever wanted to express. But I didn't think of how it might affect you all." They sat in silence again, both grappling with the tapestry of vulnerability. Finally, her sister broke the quiet. "I think we need to find a way to bridge this gap, Em. A way for you to express yourself without it feeling like an invasion on our story." The breakthrough felt monumental. "What if," Emily suggested carefully, "we work on it together? Create art that incorporates all our experiences. Pieces that resonate with our shared history but still allow me to share my perspective." Her sister's gaze softened, a glimmer of understanding creeping in. "That could work if we all agree on what is shared and how. The power of that art, the meaning behind it, could help us. But we need to be in this together." Emily felt a rush of exhilaration. This could open up the dialogue she had longed for. "Yes. I want to create a series that speaks for all of us, not just me. Invite everyone to participate so it becomes a dialogue rather than a monologue." "That's an amazing start," her sister replied, a spark illuminating her eyes as they envisioned the potential before them. "But it will take time. We'll need to have open discussions, reassess the stories that we want to tell, make sure we all feel authorized to share." As they spoke, the lightness of hope filled the room, coalescing around them like a soothing balm. Emily felt her nervousness transform into resolve. She could finally see a way forward, one where she did not have to sacrifice her aspirations for her family or vice versa. "I'll create art that leads to conversations," Emily declared, her voice emboldened by newfound clarity. "Maybe a huge canvas where we each paint our interpretations, where our narratives weave together. It would illustrate not only my journey as an artist but our collective experience as a family." Her sister smiled, visibly lighting up. "We can articulate themes like hope, hardship, pride, and solidarity. People can see our transformation together." The concept culminated, breaking the constraints that had held Emily's creativity captive. In that moment, she felt her internal struggle dissolve into optimism. Emily realized that art didn't have to mean wrestling against her family's fears. It could embody a partnership in vulnerability, nurturing that delicate equilibrium of self-expression and familial love. Later that evening, Emily gathered up her sketches. She sat on her bed, envisioning a future where the colors flowed not just from her hands but from the shared experiences of her entire family. What once felt like a perilous road ahead felt like the beginning of an extraordinary journey. Her phone buzzed once more, and she hesitated before looking at the screen. It was another message from her brother. "Would you like to meet tomorrow? I think I'm ready to talk more openly." "This is it," Emily whispered to herself, realizing that she had made a choice to embrace collective healing through her art, uniting their narratives rather than dividing them. She felt the intoxicating thrill of empowerment rush through her once again. This was her moment to embody hope, to conquer vulnerability. With a resolute heart, she began sketching out her vision, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead in this newfound union of art and family. As she painted, a tangible excitement enveloped her. Truly, this was the journey of self-discovery and familial healing she had long sought. Now was the time for her and her family to reclaim their voices not just through her art, but as a unified entity. Now was the moment to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support is vital. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share this.